questions about federal tax fraud, federal immigration fraud, federal student loan fraud, and state violations of perjury, bigamy, kickbacks, and acts of campaign fraud abuse in Boston, Washington, New York, Chicago, and Florida.
And Ilhan Omar, I hope this is part of it, but she married her brother, supposedly. I mean, there's a lot of documentation. That means she's here illegally and she's a congresswoman. And I hope you're going to be looking at that, or somebody is, all right? Because she's one of the ringleaders here. She's bad news, really bad news. She's so bad for our country.
So the calls are intensifying to get Ilhan Omar deported, so much so that the Trump administration is even responding to and investigating the very real allegation that she is not just an anti-American communist asset operating within our country, but furthermore, it very strongly does appear that she committed immigration fraud multiple different times to get into this country to begin with, which according to U.S. law can institute a denaturalization and deportation procedure. While it is very rare, these things can and do happen. As a matter of fact, we recently did just see some legal cases of successful denaturalizations happen here under the Trump administration. And so, of course, this is a very real conversation that is now happening. I'm not exactly here to promise you anything because although the evidence is very rampant, we obviously know how our justice system works. And that's obviously not just if you are a liberal, but specifically if you are a liberal politician, you're allowed to get away with anything. Doesn't matter if the Trump administration tries, they can bring the case. What's going to happen? Some woke judge is going to toss it out. So again, not here to promise anything, but I would like to point out what is perhaps the most hilarious development in this chronicle yet, which is that the Republic of Somaliland is now getting involved and is even trying to help provide the United States with receipts that she actually did commit that very immigration fraud, and is even now offering to extradite her and take her back into their country on behalf of Americans who do not want them there. Now, before you ask, if you're wondering what exactly Somaliland is, it is essentially a breakaway region of Somalia, by the way, the much more geopolitically stable and somewhat more prosperous part of the country there. And it's recognized by some governments worldwide to be its own independent nations. Others no. My understanding actually is that the first Trump administration recognized Somaliland for certain geopolitical reasons. I think it has to do with economic access to the Horn of Africa and all that stuff. But for whatever reason, they are now paying us back and basically want to take Ilhan Omar back to their own country and even potentially try her in their own criminal courts because of the fact that, as we've told you before, her family are not just some ordinary refugees that were fleeing violence as she has painted herself to be, right? She has very close family ties with the murderous, violent, genocidal, evil communist regime that ran Somalia until 1991. And the reason her family fled was not because they were some random villagers trying to get away from terrorists. No, they fled specifically because the Somali population would have been obviously extremely angry with them. And as it pertains currently to Somaliland, who is still pissed off about the very war crimes and crimes against humanity that were committed by the family friends of Ilhan Omar. By the way, keep in mind, she always lectures us about genocide and all that stuff, right? To this very day is basically still going after her and wants the United States to send her to their country. So we'll tell you about this story here today. And I repeat, this is actually 100% real. Like, Somaliland wants to take Ilhan Omar back and is totally leaning into all of the calls to get her deported here in this country. So we'll get into it. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate the support. It also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, so let us, of course, start by reminding everyone what we are talking about. I mean, first and foremost, it is believed even circa 1991 when they came into this country, the Omars basically changed their name to try to trick the U.S. into believing that they were not actually linked to the communist regime. Because as you know, right, this is basically still right after, but still largely, right, Cold War America. You know, usually we granted asylum and refugee status to the anti-communist people, right? Not literally the ones involved in the communist government. So it's believed that she basically lied, her family, I should say, basically lied about that. But of course, the very famous allegation is that which she married her brother, confirmed by court records, in order to basically allow him to stay in the country here via marriage. The track record here does seem to be strong. The whole timeline, by the way, is strange because she allegedly married her brother in 2009, but the entire time it was simply just a religious marriage, and then they only consummated it legally in 2017. And then only a couple of months later already filed for divorce, and she went on to go marry that consultant guy that she's married to now. So, of course, the whole thing does seem to be pretty obvious. And even over the weekend, JD Vance, in an interview with in an interview with Benny Johnson, I should say, officially confirmed that the Trump administration is basically looking into it. Take a listen.
Talk about Ilhan Omar and Tim Walz.
Exactly.
And obviously, Ilhan Omar, the president and the White House have been out saying that she married her brother, that there is immigration fraud going on here. These are deportable denaturalization offenses. Can you give us an update on that?
Yeah, so we actually think that Ilhan Omar definitely committed immigration fraud against the United States of America. And I talked to Stephen Miller about this actually recently. We're trying to look at what the remedies are. That's the thing that we're trying to figure out is what are the legal remedies now that we know that she's committed immigration fraud? How do you go after her? How do you investigate her? How do you actually do the thing? How do you build the case necessary to get some justice for the American people? There's a related issue, Benny, which is she has been at the center of a lot of the worst fraudsters in the Somalian community. So do I know that Ilhan Omar was aware that the Quality Leering Center was defrauding the American people? I'm not certain of it, but we at least need to investigate it, because if people can commit wrongdoing without even the fear that they're going to be found out, that's a fundamental problem. So I'm worried about the immigration fraud. I'm also worried about what did Ilhan Omar know about what was happening in the Somali community, and why was nobody looking into it until, frankly, Donald Trump came along.
Yeah, so the official stance of the Trump administration and our federal government is not even whether Ilhan Omar committed immigration fraud. They're saying 100% yes. It's simply a question of what do we do about it? What are the legal remedies? And again, as I said, the fact that she is a congresswoman and has some standing, although it's completely crooked, backwards, and shouldn't work this way, you certainly know she's going to use that as some shield of her legal protection, right? Oh, I got into Congress, therefore you can't do anything towards me without making it look like a political witch hunt or something, which frankly you could argue to a degree was almost a part of her grand scheme this entire time, right? Because, you know, it's almost so cartoonish. It's like a caricature. It's like the bad stereotype of exactly what we paint negative immigration to be, what her family has done, and basically, honestly, I'd argue a lot of that Somali situation in Minnesota, right? It's almost cartoonish how bad this situation is. Because Ilhan Omar, again, descends from what? Actual murderous communists, right? That's what her family are. So they lie to America. They come to this country pretending that's not what they are, okay, as fake refugees. They get here. You would think, by the way, you know, in that case, why don't you just keep your head down, live a quiet life, live in exile? No. She dedicates her life to openly advocating against the United States and on behalf of communist causes and radical Islamist causes for many years. Let's not forget, she literally began her political career back in 2016, advocating on behalf of the early release of actual ISIS and Al-Qaeda terrorists. Okay, so this is just what she's been all about all her life. Her daughter, by the way, you know, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. She goes to Columbia University, gets involved in the Palestine riots, recently went on that whole propaganda trip to Cuba. So it's almost cartoonish, okay? Not only do they defraud the country to get here, they get here and then they just actively start advocating against the country, right? Trying to get involved in anti-American communist causes. And after watching all of this happen, they of course say what? If you remotely criticize me or say that, you know, I'm not exactly the model immigrant to America or something, or hey, like this is actually proof. This is the walking caricature that our immigration system is broken because someone like Ilhan Omar shouldn't even exist in the United States of America. They say you're Islamophobic, right? You're just a bigot. No, we can't judge Ilhan Omar by the long track record of her and her entire family's behavior. We just have to basically sit there and bend the knee and kiss her ring because, oh, she's a Muslim communist and therefore, yeah, Ilhan Omar, we don't want to be called racist or something. No, it's utterly ridiculous, right? But again, you could almost see the angle where she knows she committed immigration fraud. When did she get elected to Congress, by the way? What was it, 2018? I believe, if I'm not mistaken, right? The year before is when she does the thing where she marries her brother and then files for the fake divorce or something. And then now, oh, if you investigate me for immigration fraud, you're just targeting me because I'm in Congress. They're after me. The system's trying to hunt me. I'm just saying. Does seem like a pretty plausible theory there. But anyways, of course, Ilhan Omar has recently tried to go out and respond to these allegations saying they're not true, right? The most disturbing part of his unhinged comments is how comfortable he is in telling the world how stupid he is, blah, 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 but that's not true, etc., etc. And then the Republic of Somaliland, this is their official government account, by the way, responds here by saying, "Careful now, daughter of the colonel. It's true, all of it." Daughter of the colonel, by the way, referring to, yes, who Ilhan Omar's family actually are, which are close links, close political allies of the murderous communist regime of pre-1991 Somalia. That's what we're dealing with here. All of it. We've got the receipts, and they're looking extra right now. Might be time to talk extradition to the Department of Justice of the United States. And they go on. Here are the receipts. Ilhan Omar's last name was Elmi before it was changed. This evidence was available, but the Obama Justice Department refused to investigate. Again, that's referring to the fact that they changed their name away from that of the communist regimes of Somalia, right? Because Elmi would have been a person they knew. They changed it to make it look like, oh, here's some innocent refugees who showed up at America's doorstep. Again, not true. Not true. Frankly, I know the Soviet Union only collapsed a few months after Somalia, but if anything, you would think these are people who should have been extradited or sent as refugees to that part of the world, to the Soviet Union, to China or something. They could deal with the annoying person she is, but no, somehow ended up in our country. And then magically, it's just a coincidence that she advocates on behalf of open borders and a mass open refugee system and all this stuff. And then, of course, not really realizing she's the prime example of why the border should be closed, the refugee system should be cut off. Honestly, you could make a strong case immigration as a whole needs to be stopped until we can figure out what the heck is going on, okay? Because so long as people like Ilhan Omar walk in this country free as naturalized citizens, it's actually proof that the system is broken. It's not working, I'm just saying. But anyways, so her brother, Ahmed Nur Saad Elmi, and their father, Nur Saad Elmi, also known as Nur Omar, use multiple names across different countries. I wonder why that could be the case. Part of the family fled to the United Kingdom, while Ilhan Omar and others entered the United States under their father's assumed name, Omar. These name changes and split identities were used to conceal the father's true war crimes and identity. I know, right? A big surprise. And by the way, of course, when she allegedly marries her brother here, one brother's named Elmi, she's named Omar. The U.S. government not really having access to records and considering that Somalia is a failed state, right? They have no way to verify this information. Says, oh, okay. Well, these are just two Somalis getting married, right? No. The whole thing was an immigration fraud. So I repeat, they committed immigration fraud twice, not once, twice. Once they get into the country, they lied to the United States about who they are during the Cold War, at least the end of it, by the way, right? And then secondly, of course, did the more famous marrying the brother thing. So as Fox News here reports, an African nation is calling for Representative Omar to be extradited after VP JD Vance claimed during an interview that the lawmaker had committed immigration fraud. The Republic of Somaliland, a partially recognized state in the Horn of Africa, reacted in an X post to the claim that Vance made in a podcast interview with Benny Johnson. Deportation, please. You're just sending the princess back to her kingdom, basically referring to if you send Ilhan Omar back to Somalia, then she's just going to be basically accepted there. Extradition, say the word, the post read, saying no, Somaliland wants her because her family's essentially wanted for war crimes, right, is what's going on there. But, this is the queen of Gaza, by the way. Oh, genocide, this and that. I'm just going to say, generally speaking, if you're going, you ever notice this about leftists too? They pick the worst possible ambassadors for their causes, largely because they can't find a better ambassador, right? For example, if you are going to pick someone to argue the liberal side in the immigration debate, you would think maybe don't put up people there like Ilhan Omar or Congressman Sharif Thanadar, right? Literally the two worst examples of liberal immigration policies. You're like, oh, let's put them up there, right? And it's the same thing with Gaza. It's the same thing with Gaza. Oh, Ilhan Omar, champion of the Gaza cause, fighting against genocide in U.S. Congress. Her family are freaking war criminals. And it's not an issue of, she's like Osama bin Laden's daughter, I believe, or something, who's totally rebelled against it. No. She's totally proud of who she is, right? She's like, but, I guess just because, the war is being fought against Muslims, that's the only reason she cares about the genocide there, I suppose. So in the interview, Vance, of course, said, and I quote, "We think Ilhan Omar definitely committed immigration fraud against the United States of America, and they are looking there for the remedies." By the way, this is an older post, but it does point out that Ilhan Omar has largely throughout her life stayed silent on the recognition of Somaliland as an independent state in general, but especially, I guess, Israel does recognize Somaliland. And I really have to say, I wonder why. I wonder why Ilhan Omar doesn't, because, this is a pretty big political debate and issue in Somalia, and some greater Somalia, I guess you could say, is, hey, is Somaliland a real country or not? But for very mysterious reasons, she won't speak about that. She'll rush to recognize Palestine far more before she does Somaliland. Again, I wonder why that could be the case. Now, that said, I'm not here to get anyone's hopes up because, we hear this all the time. Oh, arrests are coming. This person's going to get denaturalized or something. But I would point out, if we're to look for potentially here a shred of good news, is that just a couple of days ago, the Justice Department had announced, actually this was just on Thursday, that it had secured the denaturalization of two people. So these are U.S. citizens who naturalized, right? They came into this country as immigrants, but they were convicted of lying on their U.S. citizenship application about their criminal history. And why is that very important? Why is that almost a landmark moment for immigration law in this country? I mean, I'm sure it's happened before, but why in the Trump administration is it a landmark moment? Is because of the fact that usually it's generally considered, okay, once you're a U.S. citizen, you're fine. And that's, of course, the legal shield that Ilhan Omar will likely use. Oh, I'm a U.S. citizen now. I'm in Congress. What are you going to do about it? But it is worth noting that although it's rare, there is a very real procedure. There is a precedent by which, yes, if you lied on your application to attain U.S. citizenship, it's no different than you lying on your application on the visa to get into this country, right? You lie on your visa, you get caught, you get revoked. It's generally assumed, oh, you lie to get citizenship. Once you have citizenship, you're untouchable. That's not true. That's not true. And even if this is just two people, a very small amount, it does set a recent legal precedent, right? And that's why it could potentially be a good thing, why it could potentially be important that, hey, we can actually denaturalize citizens who defrauded this country, who committed immigration fraud. Ilhan Omar, we well know, committed multiple different types of immigration fraud. So that's all to say, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, again, I would venture to guess she's probably going to use this shield of I'm in Congress and therefore there's nothing you can do to me, despite the fact that Donald Trump was the Republican frontrunner and they tried to throw him in jail quite famously. But who knows? Who knows? We'll just see. All I know is I would like to thank the Republic of Somaliland for being willing to take Ilhan Omar. There you have it. By the way, if you guys wonder, I might end up putting the title of this video just as Somalia, because a lot of people don't know what Somaliland is. But, you understand in this video, right? So we're talking about a region of Somalia, a country, some would say, that is willing to take them back. But anyways, that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.